Hello, thank you for listening to the Peace Corps Kosovo podcast. My name is Joan, and I am a COS 5 volunteer. Today, I'm going to be talking to 3 Peace Corps volunteers who live in different ethnic communities around Kosovo. They're going to share their experiences about the wedding season here in Kosovo. Today, I am joined by Abigail, Lindsay, and Sam. Say hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Can you guys each introduce yourself a little bit, starting with Abigail?
Hi. Like Joan said, my name is Abigail. I live in a Serb village in the southern part of Kosovo near the Shar Mountains, and I've been to 1 wedding.
My name is Lindsay. I live in a small Bosniak community close to the city of Prizren, and I have been to 2 weddings.
Hello, I'm Sam. I live in an Albanian village, and I have attended 1 wedding, and then my village has also taken a bride, so I've seen that, the other side of that ceremony as well.
That's awesome. I don't think a lot of us have actually seen a taking of the bride. Could you maybe explain that?
Yeah, so it's basically after the wedding and all the ceremony, the bride and the groom, they get in their cars, and they fly the Albanian flag, and they want to be seen as much as possible. Like, they're beeping their horns, playing loud music. The more people who know that you're getting married, the better. And they take the bride to the groom's house. But it actually starts, in my village anyway, 10 days before the bride actually arrived. Where, they actually were just celebrating. They had traditional music, dancing. It seemed to last for hours and hours. Throughout the day, even until about 10, 11 at night. So the village, the village is taking a bride soon when, you hear the celebrations. So
Sounds like quite the celebration for that.
Yeah.
All right. Abigail, why don't you tell us a little bit about the Serbian wedding that you visited? What was your favorite part? What did it look like?
So the wedding was in a hotel a little outside the village, and we dressed up. So we dressed up in more formal clothing, and most people were dressed up. Women were generally more dressed up than the men. However, compared to the level of makeup and glamour that I had seen during PST in an Albanian family, it was not as intense. And there was a greater variation in what people considered party attire. So from gowns to pantsuits to even some of the younger women or the kids wearing a nice set of jeans and a blouse rather than a full dress, which surprised me. I think my favorite part of it was the presentation of the wedding cake at the very end. All the lights went out, which I didn't understand why. And then this massive cake comes out on a trolley, and it has sparklers and flares in it, and it's going off. And then there's a bunch of little cakes behind it that are the support cakes to make sure everyone gets some, and they also have sparklers and flares going on. So there's just a lot of fire in an enclosed space. And then it gets brought out to much fanfare and applause, and then there's the familiar, cut the cake, feed your spouse a piece of cake, and then everyone gets cake, and everyone leaves immediately. Cake means that the wedding is over.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That is quite the symbol to be get out.
Yep.
And what about the Bosniak weddings? What did those look like?
The Bosniak weddings seem similar to Albanian weddings, but I think that there's a few differences. One of the weddings I went to was in a small village called Jablanica, and that one seemed a little bit more traditional. It was during the day, and they had the traditional music. They had hired a drum player and the horn player, and they had men circle dancing in one part of the village and the women circle dancing in another part of the village. So it was gender segregated for a while. The Bosniaks also, I don't know the meaning behind it, but they'll take a large pole and put streamers on it and decorate the pole. So while the women are circle dancing, one of the women will hold this pole as they're dancing around. And then we had a traditional lunch. and then the bride is brought out of her home and ushered to the groom's house, while the men are waiting in the streets and waving these like red handkerchiefs, not the Albanian flag, because they don't identify with the Albanian flag, but there seems to be some parallels between Albanian weddings, because the bride is sort of brought out and escorted to the groom's house, the groom's family's home. And I think the other wedding I went to was similar, except it was in a much bigger wedding, and the circle dancing lasted from 6 p.m. to 2 o'clock in the morning. So it was 8 hours long.
That's all night. Wow. That is huge in proportion to American weddings. That's so long.
Yeah, that was just the circle dancing. They also had a lunch before that.
Mm-hmm. Nice. And what is the circle dancing? Because we've brought it up. Can you maybe describe it? Because it's pretty common amongst all three of these groups.
Yeah, circle dancing, it's essentially, I believe it's 5 steps total, and people get in a giant circle and they just dance. And if you get out of sync, you can just start walking or pulling the person next to you along. And sometimes people will get in the middle and they'll dance. A lot of the weddings are professionally videotaped, so they'll have maybe a professional singer or a professional videographer who's in the middle videotaping the whole dance. I think that describes it. Would you add anything to that, Sam?
No, I mean, that's pretty much it. Like, the wedding I attended, like you just said, had a camera on a crane. Mm-hmm. So it was just massive. So it would be all the way up to the ceiling, getting every angle imaginable. Of course, yes, they have a hired professional singer. The dancing, very similar. Everyone, gets in a circle. The wedding I attended only had 2 variations. So there was like one easy beginner step and then one that was a little bit more complicated. It was really funny watching the people who just absolutely could not get the steps down, and you could tell that they were just being dragged around, which made me feel better about my dancing ability. But yeah, it was very. I'm seeing a lot of similarities between the three. So.
Mm-hmm. Wedding season here is a really big deal. I mean, I know in my village it is talked about for months before summer even happens. And wedding season is usually in the summer because all of the diaspora from Germany and the US and other European countries do come back specifically for these weddings. Do any of you guys have any thoughts on why they are such a big event in the culture here in Kosovo?
I mean, it is a major life cycle event. I mean, you are born, you become an adult, you decide to start a family with another human being, you have a child, and then you die. Like, those are the big the big life cycle events. In every religion, in every culture, they have something marking those. Some have extras, some have, specific interpretations of them, but that's everywhere. And who doesn't like to party until 2 a.m.? I mean, there's not often a lot to do around the villages. Like, even my village is a bit bigger and it has cafes and it has a club or like live music on the weekends, but the minute you leave that village, like, there isn't much to entertain. Mm-hmm. So you get to dance, you get to eat. In my village, in Serb communities, you get to drink, and it's fun. I mean, it costs money though, because the guests are expected to fund, either pay for their ticket or, give gifts of money. So, I'll hear complaints about like, oh, I have so many weddings to go to, it's going to be so expensive, but it's fun and they go anyway.
Nice. Mm-hmm. How many people usually attend these ones? Because if they're being funded by the guests, like in their big events, like they must have a lot of people. Like
the one I went to probably had like 100+ people. Mm-hmm. My host mother has definitely told me, and bragged about how, like, oh, my daughter had a wedding and there were like 300 people. We had so many friends and family. It's definitely a badge of honor to have a bigger wedding, because that means there's more people who care about you and more people that are in your friend circle, and bigger families, which is also, you know, a valued thing. So, and I think that, like, it can cost maybe... Actually, scratch that. I don't know how much it costs. But I don't want to make a guess that's wrong. But there are gifts of money, and that those are added. Like, as you walk in, you take a picture with the bride and groom, and there's like a basket for the money, envelopes of money that you give as a gift.
Nice.
I've seen signs at banks that say you can get a personal loan for up to 30,000 euros to do a wedding. So I think some people do spend that much.
Yeah, I'll second that. I've talked to my host mom about averaging like the prices, and she says it's anywhere from $10,000 to $30,000 is a typical, like, normal spending for a wedding. So.
Wow. Yeah.
I have a question, actually, because I know that in Albanian weddings, particularly the, like, bride's night before, there's like 9 dresses involved. So, because I know that the Serbs don't do that, or not that I'm aware, because I haven't seen that, but I was involved. I did get to visit a bride's night, bachelorette-ish type party before, and the number of outfits involved was massive. Is that where most of the money goes? Because those were elaborate gowns.
Yeah. I mean, I imagine that's going to be a significant amount. I don't know how much a dress costs in Kosovo, and I don't know if these are special, you know, tailor-made or anything like that. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of dress changes. The more the better. You're supposed to show off, you know, I have all this clothes, you know, I'm wealthy, I have these gifts, and I'm able to do this. It's a lot of showing off. And my host mom again said that you have to change dresses at least 7 times. Like, there's a limit on what you just have to do that. Otherwise, people are going to talk about, like, you know, maybe you're not going to have a comfortable life, or you're not going to have a positive marriage or something like that. It's you know, it's wrapped up in a lot of cultural tradition, and they just take it very seriously. But I'm curious because my host mom showed me a video of the night before, and so I'll explain it, and then I want to hear, because you actually attended one. But what it was, she called it, I guess it kind of translated to like the crying ceremony. And it was, you know, going through the dresses. Only women I saw in the video, so I think it was mostly just traditionally just women are invited to it. And the bride wore this really lovely red veil, maybe you would call it, covering her face. And my host mom said that so nobody can see her, like, crying. And then, so the bride was seated, and she's surrounded by her family and friends. And I'm not sure what this was, but they put a glove on her hand, and she dipped it into some dark tar-like substance. And then made, like, it looked like fingerprints or something on a white sheet. And I couldn't really understand what my host mom was trying to say about it. So that was a mystery to me. But then the song was playing, and the bride was crying. And then there was an older woman who was, like, spinning a tepsia, those circular dishes, on the ground while the song was playing. And it was just, she said, yeah, this is like the mourning process of the, you know, leaving your family's home, going to a new family, a new region. And it's like the cry, it's the mourning process. So I'm interested in how your experience went as well.
I did see that. That did happen, and the colors are correct. I am racking my brain to try and remember if there was that glove and fingerprint thing, and I can't remember. I do remember there being a lot of candles.
Yes.
Where, like, and it seemed to go from, like, close to out, like, from closest family and friends to an out, because, like, not everyone got a candle. I didn't get one, for example, and she didn't know me, so that made sense. But, like, the ones closest to her they'd light a candle and they'd sit with her, and it very much felt like a vigil of some kind, and it was very emotional, and it felt very odd for me to be there, because this was my, like, host cousin from PST who I'd met once before. And it was such a emotionally charged moment that it felt very awkward for me to be there because I didn't know what to do with myself. I mean, what you do is you sit quietly and respectfully, of course, but, like, I wasn't sure if at any point I'd be called on to, like, have a response with the community or anything like that as appropriate, and so that was intense to see.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Have you been to one of those, Lindsay?
I have not, but I have heard about it, that there's a lot of crying, and that you are sort of required to cry, and that if you don't cry, that it's not good. Not if you're a guest to the crying. I'm not really sure. This is just all hearsay that I've heard.
Okay. I actually joked with my host mom because of the veil. I said, "Is she really crying, or is this like, is she joking?" And she, you know, she's like, "No, she actually cries." But I asked her, like, "Well, what if she doesn't?" And she's just like, "Well, it doesn't matter. You know, what are you gonna do if she's not crying?" So. But.
Interesting. Yeah, actually, this is the only part of a wedding here that I've actually been to, because there were like 3 women in my village last year who got married and moved to other villages. And they sing during this. It was similar to what you all said. I didn't see the fingerprint thing or the rolling of like the pan, which a tapia is essentially like a mixing bowl, kind of. It's similar, not exactly, but kind of close. And they sing this song, and it was translated to me as being like, "Oh, why are you leaving your family? Aren't you, like, don't you know that you're breaking their hearts, and your mother is crying and your father is crying," letting her know that her family's really going to miss her and that their hearts are breaking. But overall, it is I think it is supposed to be kind of like a happy ceremony, like you're moving on with your life and starting a new tradition, a new chapter. So it's a very interesting process, weddings here. How old are people usually when they get married? Do you guys know from the weddings that you've been to, or how they've even met their husbands?
I don't know how they met their husbands because I wasn't personally
I guess
like friends with either of them. Not with either the bride or with the wedding that I saw. But it does seem that, like, from the stories that I heard, for example, my host mother met her husband when she went off to school in Uroševac Ferezaj. She actually left and broke the heart of her high school sweetheart before that, because she left him for another man, but she really loved her husband. So she chose him instead. And so I think at least in Serb communities, there's a higher chance of, like, leaving to go to another school or to another university, like, far away from home, and so there's a higher chance of meeting somebody from outside your community. But then also, like, they all go to high school together, they probably meet each other there. There's the cafes that have live music and dancing, where my host mother thinks I should go because I haven't gotten a boyfriend yet. And so I imagine it's something like that. Their ages are relatively low compared to the U.S. standards, so shortly after or just as you're graduating from college, somewhere along those lines.
Yeah. Anthony, who's in a Bosniak village near me, told me that in his village they can get married as young as 15 if they can get permission from the families. If the families condone it, then they get married as young as 15 through 19. The wedding I went to, one of the weddings I went to, the couple was a bit older. I think they were in their late 20s, but I think that's usually pretty unusual. Yeah, that's all I know.
Yeah. My host mom, for example, was married when she was 18. Currently she's 35, so she's technically, like, she's still a millennial. On, like, the older side of millennials, if you're gonna be technical. But the wedding I went to this summer, the bride was in her early 30s. So maybe in Albanian areas it just varies, or maybe as time is going on, it would be, you know, maybe just tradition is changing and it's not as important how old you are.
Yeah, definitely very possible, and probably a little better considering that 15-year-old age.
Yeah.
That's young. I would not be a good bride at that age. So with weddings, you mentioned a little bit earlier that there are gifts of money. In the other communities, or even maybe in Serbian villages, is there any other traditional kind of gift throughout this process of getting married?
I know that there was a robbery in my village, and I was told that there's these traditional gold coins that are given to the bride and her family, and like a gold belt, the filigrane belts that you see in the prison area. And so these gifts are given, and when the wedding was happening, this was a wedding I didn't attend, but it was taking place in the city at a music hall. Someone must have known about it because they robbed the whole house, and I was told that 15,000 euros worth of gifts were stolen. So those are the gifts that I know of. Not the gifts, I guess, when you think of American weddings where you stock the house with, I don't know, sheets or bathroom supplies or kitchen supplies. They definitely don't do that in the Bosniak community. I think the only gifts that are given are money, like at the wedding, but that's all. I can't think of anything else.
At the I guess the banquet hall where the wedding took place, there was an area where guests would place the gifts that they were bringing as they entered. A lot of it was wrapped, so I couldn't really tell what it was, but there were some gift baskets with like fruits. I did see some silverware, some like fabric of some kind, maybe like sheets or something like that. And unfortunately, we don't know the house where the bride was brought in our village, so I didn't really get to see like what the bride's dowry was, the gift that they give to the house of the husband. So I unfortunately didn't get to see that. So just the, I guess, fabrics and silverware it seemed to be.
Yeah.
I only saw money. I don't imagine that it's impossible that there were other types of gifts. But I only saw money, and my host mother has only spoken of money. Like, I haven't had her point to anything in the house and been like, oh, I got this when I was married, or, my daughter got this when they got married, or anything like that. So I don't know.
Yeah. That would make sense, since a lot of brides do end up moving into, like, the family, into the family's house. There's probably, you don't really need more sheets. And something, I don't know if you guys really know much about this, but I know that if there's a recent death, people sometimes tend to forego going to weddings. Is this common between all of your sites, and what do you guys know about this?
I actually had a death in my family recently. The host grandmother died in my family, and it was right in the middle of wedding season, and my family was not allowed to attend the musica, which was in the village, and I know my host sister was really disappointed because all of her friends were there, but they were essentially in mourning period, so they didn't attend any of the wedding events after the Micah passed away. And what I was told was that there's a mourning period based on, I guess, the severity of the death in the family. So my host sister told me that, for example, if she had passed away at the age of 17, which is, very young, that her parents would forego weddings for many, many years.
Oh, wow.
I also had a death in the family over the summer. It was about a month and a half ago, and it was the, I guess, like the matriarch, the oldest woman in my direct family's family. So they were very involved in the funeral. They helped facilitate the funeral and the visitings for 4 days straight in the village. And we did not celebrate Bayram at all. We couldn't have guests in the house. We couldn't make any special celebratory dishes or sweets like baklava. We couldn't do any of that. But after we did attend the wedding, I think it was a very close cousin that lives in our village who was getting married. So I don't know if the closeness of the family, because it was immediate family, maybe that is why we went, or maybe it's a different tradition. I'm not sure. But we did attend a wedding after about 2 weeks after that death. So
interesting.
I have not experienced a death in the family. My host mother has lost friends over the course of the year, but those were not during wedding seasons and not particularly close to wedding season, and they weren't related to her, so it didn't affect her wedding attendance. I think wedding attendance is affected mainly by if she desires to go or not. And aside from that, I really haven't heard anything along those lines. I would imagine that there's mourning periods, and I would not be surprised if there was a time when they said, I'm not going to go to a wedding because, my father, my grandfather, my sister or cousin just died, and people would respect that. I don't know about ritualized or culturally expected mourning periods.
Interesting. Lindsay, tell me about more about the Bosnian weddings, because they have a special tradition that's really unique to them. Can you explain it?
Yes, in the Bosniak communities, traditionally they have face painting for the bride. So the bride's face will be painted white, and then there's intricate gold lines drawn all over the face with jewels at certain points, with the gold lines radiating out. And it's been a tradition that has been done for thousands of years. However, it is slowly dying out. Brides today, I've been told, want to be more modern. My friend Valissa was getting married this year, and I asked her if she was doing the traditional face painting, and her response was, "Thank God, no, I want to be a modern bride." So the impression I get is that the women that do the traditional face painting tend to be more traditional in their families. And also, it's such an intricate face painting that's done. There has to be training done. There's a woman that lives in one of the Gornje villages. I don't know if it's Gornje Lubinier or Gornje Donje, one of the Bosniak villages, where she has trained 2 women from the younger generation to continue this tradition. And I think it costs about €100 to do it, but overall, it's not happening as much. And the meaning behind the face painting is to ward off bad luck. Also, National Geographic photographed this tradition a few years ago, so you can Google Bosniak face painting and you'll see these incredibly beautiful pictures of Bosniak brides.
Yeah, the pictures are absolutely gorgeous. Very, very intricate. I'm glad that it's not completely dying off. All right, and one last question. Do you guys have any good wedding stories? Anything interesting that might have happened? I know we've already got one on the robbery, but anything else?
I sort of have one. The wedding I went to in Grncharne, my friend Valissa, she got married, and she had this incredibly beautiful white dress, and they were circle dancing. This was the wedding where they were circle dancing for hours and hours and hours, and it was right at midnight. I saw her ushered into a car and driven off by her husband with a couple of other people. And I thought, okay, this is like a Cinderella story where, at midnight, the wedding must be over, but I get they're still dancing. And then they came back about 20 minutes later, and she gets out of the car in this incredibly beautiful big princess black lace dress. And I was like, oh my God, this must be a traditional night to day dress change type thing. And I was texting her the next day, and she said, oh no, that was just, the wedding dress was too heavy. I couldn't do it anymore, so I had to change my dresses. A complete misunderstanding. I just projected so much meaning on that dress change.
Oh, that's hilarious. Those dresses are really big, though.
They're big and they're really pretty.
Yeah. They're gorgeous. Do you have anything, Sam? Any great stories?
Not any particular interesting stories, but I'll just say I really enjoyed my experience being at an Albanian wedding. It was just really nice to see everybody. Everybody just wore what they thought was beautiful, and it was so cool to see everyone's interpretation of that. A couple of my favorites was this woman who wore a black sequins gown, and then her hair was in a high top bun, and it was bleach blonde with ringlets coming down. It was just all of it. It was just so pretty, Mm-hmm. And then with the dancing and everybody just coming together and just kind of, I don't know, it was just showing off, but in a positive way, and it was just, I just really enjoyed the experience.
That's
No, the only funny thing I could think of was the music break. So there was hired musicians and band, and they were singing mostly traditional folk songs for like several hours, and then there was a break where the singers stopped singing so they could, refresh and rest, and it was instead playing recorded covers of like American love songs, which I understood, and they were all sad. They were all like pining after a lost love or a breakup or something, and it was just not wedding themed. But I do not think enough people understood what the words actually were saying, so they were very pretty, kind of like slow dancey songs, except they were very sad. Though I am told that also a lot of the traditional folk songs are also very sad, very like deeply like painful, in like if you take them quite literally. And then after the music break, it was modern songs. So there was a section of traditional, and then a break with sad American music, and then modern Serb pop kind of rock, etc. Then all the young people got up and started singing along with that. It was fun.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting. That's quite the transition of music.
Yep.
Nice. Yeah.
Did not hear Despacito though, so I count that as a win.
That is the win. Yeah, that song is very, very popular here. I hear it on the bus every day. So, well, thank you guys so much for doing this and for giving your insight in the weddings of Kosovo. So it's definitely a fun, really big season here, and I'm glad we're able to share a little bit about it. So,
yeah, thanks
thank
for
you.
having us.